It's a real pleasure. I'm so honored. I was looking at the list of prior speakers, and truly, it's a great honor to be among them. I want to say a special thank you to my host, Christina Felfa, for showing me such a wonderful time and meeting her lab and the others, and also congratulations on your renewal of the cluster, as Christina told me. So it's all very exciting, and I'm eager to hear more about your projects and follow you over the next 7 years. So I am at the moment writing a book. The title is Raising Future. This is the working title of the book. It keeps changing, but the ideas are coming from what we've learned in the last 10 years at my research lab, which takes trying to understand why parents make the decisions that they make, why the decisions that parents from economically disadvantaged backgrounds seem to differ in some routine ways from their more advantaged peers, how that matters for child skill development, and what can we do about it if our goal is to reduce inequality in long-run outcomes for children and their families. So this talk is not it's not just one paper. There's not going to be maybe any regression coefficients. It's really an ideas talk. I welcome your input. I'm going to make sure that I speak for only an hour so that we have the 30 minutes for discussion, but I would also invite you to interrupt me at any time. I'm now used to econ style where people don't always even get off the title slide before there's a question, but you seem gentler than that. So I'm going to go forward and let's just talk for a minute about developing children's skills. And just to set ideas at the outset, when I say skills, I mean a variety of things. I mean cognitive skills, numeracy, literacy, the kinds of things that are sort of widely available in data sets if we want to think about that. I also say non-cognitive skills, although as a developmental psychologist, I'm sort of prohibited from saying non-cognitive because, of course, all skill, whether it's numeracy or patience or conscientiousness, is cognitive. But non-cognitive skill, the things as I just said, patience, conscientiousness, enthusiasm for learning, curiosity. Generally in the field, it's been this bucket of somewhat less well-defined characteristics that's sort of left over after we identify numeracy and literacy, and of course health as human capital. So there's a range of skills I'm interested in, and I don't think I need to convince you that developing these skills in children is a concern not only for the individual child, but the community and the place in which they live. So it's pretty well established that increasing children's skills, their cognitive skills in particular, is good for GDP and good for all the things we care about for being healthy and happy and having a well-remunerated job when we grow up. So I think this is inarguable that developing kids' skills is a national, indeed an international concern. What we know, this is sort of really just a stylized fact. Don't ask me to explain exactly what let's see, yeah, the lines are showing up here. This is just, again, a kind of a stylized infographic showing you that the gap between rich and poor kids, here it's actually the gap between kids whose mothers have varying levels of education, the gap in their cognitive skill opens up as early as one can measure these skills. So developmental psychologists actually measure kids' skills, at a very young age, but we have these kind of data in many population level data sets. The gap in these skills by family background opens early, and it closes not at all over the course of children's schooling years. So there's two important facts that I take from this figure that motivate my work. One is that at least in the US, what has happened, or shall I say what has not happened by age 3, is any exposure to formal schooling. So most kids in the US don't go to preschool. Most kids are not in any kind of mandatory schooling until they reach kindergarten at age 5. So all that is to say this should direct our attention to the importance of parents and the home environment. The second thing we can say is that as you can see here, despite going to school, school alone does not do much to shape the inequalities of these test scores over children's schooling years. Now, maybe we can say it's a good thing that the gaps don't widen further, But this all leads me to our basic argument, which is that when I say child skill, most people say school. This seems to be the association. When I say education, we say teaching in schools. What I want to say, and really this is what we've been saying for 10 years now, is that schools cannot be solely responsible for building children's skills. That of course schools are important, but schools can't do it alone. And we need to support parents to support their kids' skill. That's pretty intuitive. Well, actually, I should say it's not intuitive. It's pretty simple, but most people, especially in the U.S., we have no plan. We have, we have fewer plans every day to support families in the U.S., but we have no big plan to support families and to support children's skill building in the home environment. We've invested almost all of our funds, of our scientific and our research energy in thinking about, let's have a new curriculum, let's change class size, let's teach teachers, let's coach teachers, let's do any number of things. We spend in the U.S. a very, in relative perspective to other OECD countries, a huge amount on schooling, and kids' test scores are only going down in the U.S., especially after COVID, but there's been no COVID recovery. So this is my bottom line, is that if you care about children's skills, you have to think beyond schools. And if nothing else, I can just argue that that's where kids are spending their time. They're either spending their time at home in the company of their parents or caregivers, or in environments that those parents and caregivers select for them. So the long reach of parental influence is strong. And if I just look again, these are data that we drew from the American Time Use Survey. And this is just showing us from birth to age 18, the share of the time that children are awake. So the denominator here does not include the time that kids are sleeping. But the share of time that children are awake, that they spend, again, in the company of their family and caregivers versus the time they spend in school, the time outside of school dwarfs the time they spend in school. And again, this is really more just of a stylized fact to try to convince you, if you hadn't thought of it before, if all you thought is, I'm going to intervene where children do spend their time, it would not be in schools. So children spend, as I said, okay, so fact number one, children spend a huge share of time with their parents and caregivers, but we also know from many descriptive studies that children from households where parents have more education and income spend more time in learning activities with parents, and that both the quantity and the quality of that time differs. Okay, so again, this is I'm sure many are aware, for those of us who are interested in inequality in children's family background, children from economically disadvantaged households spend fewer minutes a day in the kinds of activities we think promote skill development. So there's a couple interesting facts I want to tell you about this time. We get these kind of data from a time use survey, which asks parents to report to us, how did you spend the last 24 hours? And I love time use data because theoretically it's an equal playing field. Everybody has 24 hours a day. Of course, people have different constraints on their time and different work schedules and different obligations to care for other people. But at least we can say, how did you divide up the 24 hours that everybody has? And what we find routinely, and this is, there's many time diaries in various countries, and we routinely find that college-educated parents spend more minutes per day on these things that I will call learning activities. This is reading, talking with children, doing puzzles, playing games, etc. These are the kinds of activities that we think promote both cognitive and non-cognitive skill. So doing imaginative play and puzzles and talking to children fosters literacy, but it also fosters curiosity, empathy, a strong emotional bond between children and their caregivers. So although the causal evidence on the per unit return of parent time investment is weaker than we would wish from the literature, we still think that these gaps are important. And so again, if you just, a time diary takes one day and people believe it is representative of all days, and if you believe that's true, you can add up those differences on any day, and if you add it up over the first 2 or 5 years of a child's life, it ends up being something that strikes you as a meaningful amount of time. Okay, so this descriptive difference is something I've thought about a lot, but something very interesting about where this difference comes from, I want to tell you because I think it's highly relevant for parenting interventions and efforts to shift parent behavior. This gap, okay, so the first thing you can say, it's 18 minutes a day. Well, so let me just say that maybe counter to your expectations, college-educated parents are not reading to their kids 3 hours a day. Like, on average, they're reading to their kids, maybe 25 minutes, or, altogether these learning activities, they actually take up a small share of any parent's day. Nevertheless, the gap by family background exists. But if we average over all, how do I come up with this 18-minute gap? A large share of that gap arises from the extensive margin. That is the share of less educated parents who have many more zeros on a given day than their college-educated counterparts. Conditional on any time, the gap across family background is actually much smaller. To me, this is one of the most important things to recognize, because when I'm doing an intervention, what I want to do is shift people from no time investment to just a little bit of time investment on most days. If I could do that, I would make a big dent in this family background gap in educational time use. But if I know that, then I have to ask myself, why are there so many more 0-minute days? What is giving rise to the fact that some parents are in a habit of doing just a little bit on most days, and for another group of parents, most of the days go by without that activity taking place? That fact motivates most of what we do in my research lab. Because to me that call, and I'm going to tell you, a bunch of other things I think we know about economically disadvantaged parents, which is going to lead to the conclusion that the difference is not about knowing that you should do something. It's not about not wanting to spend time in these activities with your kid. It's not about not enjoying that time. It's rather that there's an intention-action gap, that most parents are more similar to each other than they are different in their expectations, their aspirations, what they know. I mean, of course, you can find examples for me that says, well, there's a certain set of things that only college-educated parents know. But there's also many, many things that all parents know. Some parents follow through and others don't. And I'm interested in why that is the case, and we've arrived at a conclusion that life just gets in the way for a lot of parents, as it does for most of us. We all wish to do a certain thing on a day or a one-time action, and we forget, we procrastinate, we get distracted, and then the thing doesn't happen. And that's how we think about parent decision-making and parent-child engagement. So our goal, as I say, is to close this intention-action gap and basically figure out how we help parents who want to do something follow through and be in the habit of doing it. And I really love the idea of habits because they are self-reinforcing. Once you have the habit, the beauty of it is you don't have to think about it anymore. That's the definition of a habit. So that's our approach to thinking about parents and closing this SES-based gap. And that big warm-up was simply to tell you that's rather different from the traditional developmental psychology approach, which assumes that much of this gap arises from a lack of information or a wholly different set of beliefs about what you want or what you think is important. And that has led to a proliferation of interventions which I think are very information heavy and start with a presumption that I need to convince this person to do something that they've never heard of or they don't want to do, or That's a very hard task. I find that our approach in just thinking about capitalizing on your good intentions is easier and simpler and offers the possibility for something less expensive in time and money to shift behavior. So that's kind of the setting for what we're doing. I can also, having said that, I'm now going to contradict myself just a tiny bit. And I will say that although there's this gap in quantity, and I've now told you where that comes from, we also see differences in I'll just say the quality or the composition of time that parents do spend. And on average, it tends to be the fact that although less educated parents are spending time fostering their children's skills, they are doing things we can observe are more rote, more basic. We ask we have large-scale representative surveys of households in Chicago who run the whole income distribution. And we routinely find that when we ask parents with more limited education, what do you think is important for your child's kindergarten readiness? That it will be much more about counting, knowing the letters of the alphabet, knowing what is the sound of the beginning letters of words. In contrast, I should also say not being bullied, obeying the teacher, those sort of things make sense for certain economic contexts, but what we are more concerned about is that college-educated parents seem to prioritize that their child is curious and loves learning, things that are harder to measure, that don't have a sort of finite, like I learned the alphabet, now I'm done. They can grow infinitely. And importantly, these skills are not likely to be learned elsewhere, okay? Because schools, so the schools that serve economically disadvantaged kids, in the US anyway, are basically going to spend the preschool years and kindergarten teaching kids how to count to 50 and what is the alphabet. So we think it's a missed opportunity for parents to be spending their time doing that in the home environment when kids are all going to get that anyway. And college-educated parents are trying to foster the outcomes that are unlikely to be learned in school. I mean, they will be learned because in the US, children are highly segregated by socioeconomic status and their peer group. Everyone has the same parents, and so when they come together, it looks like school is teaching those things, but really it's just we have this peer effect where every child is coming from a similar kind of home environment. But we are interested in this difference in focus across families as well. And it's a longer conversation, but I think we've missed the mark in the US in our parenting interventions by somehow impressing upon less educated parents that these are the things they're supposed to be doing. And if we can reorient the time that they do spend, I think that would also make a difference. Any clarifying questions so far? Yeah.
How much of the focus of lower income parents on rote skills comes from what is being taught in Head Start programs?
I think all of it. I mean, I'm exaggerating. I think so much of it. Yeah, that's exactly, you read my mind. And I think it's a real problem because parents are paying attention to what their kids are learning. I mean, again, not all low-income kids go to Head Start. Head Start is the subsidized pre-K program for economically disadvantaged kids. It doesn't serve all eligible kids, as you know. But there are many similar programs to Head Start, and the idea is those programs interact with the families and lead by example. And I think it's not at all surprising that parents think that's what we should be doing because that's what they're learning in schools. That's not what advantaged kids do in preschool. So exactly. I think, yeah, that's an idea I think about a lot. Okay, so I talked about the amount of time, I talked about the content of time. Let me just talk, again, I told you that parents are similar in many ways to one another. Yeah, Christina.
Just a quick question to the previous slide. So would there also be a gap between the parents, the educated parents nowadays and let's say 30 years ago? So would they also not have yet fostered curiosity, love of learning? So you think it's a new thing, or it has been
I
always?
think it's a persistent thing. I mean, I think, again, if we also look at the kinds of places that parents place their kids in early childhood education programs, I mean, rich kids go to nursery school whose mission is to foster, play and open-ended thinking, and low-income kids go, I mean, Head Start, of course, doesn't say that we have kids sit at desks and learn the ABCs, but we have lots of studies that have observed what goes on within those settings, and the kind of parent or teacher-child talk is also very rote. And the modal question is a question that has a one-word correct answer, or it's a directive. So I think historically it has, I will also say, of course, we know from people like David Deming that non-cognitive skills are becoming more important in the labor market as technology replaces rote skills. I think it's certainly possible that college-educated parents know that. I mean, they are preparing their kids for the economy that those kids will inhabit. So it's possible that with that change in the kinds of skills that are rewarded in the labor market, it's the college-educated parents who have kept up.
Was always there. I guess this gap was
Yeah,
always there.
but I mean, but rich and poor kids have always been prepared for a different labor market. So we go all the way back to Melvin Cohn and saying, well, I'm preparing this kid for a job on the factory line where obedience is really important, and I'm preparing this other kid in this other family to be the CEO where independent thinking is important. I mean, this is decades-old research. Okay, so I just want to tell you that parents from different educational backgrounds believe similarly in the return on their investment. So this is showing you, this is from a survey of, as I say, 2,000 parents that we did in Chicago, pretty representative of the share of parents in the US population who does and doesn't have a BA degree, about 30% with a BA and 70% with some lesser amount of education. All I want to show you is that less educated parents and highly educated parents alike tell us on a survey that they understand that the more time they invest, the higher is their kids' rank. That their kids' rank when they get to kindergarten will be the same. I have a million examples that I could show you of the similarity in parent beliefs. And so again, this just is an idea that tells me what I don't need to spend my time doing is trying to convince a bunch of parents that were they to do this thing, it would be better for their kid. They already, this is a shared belief that there's a linear increase in rank with more increase in time. But on this same survey, we asked two other interesting questions. Again, these are self-report, so take it all with a grain of salt. Most of the, most of what we know about what parents do comes from self-report, and that's, I think, a big limitation in our research. But here we asked those same group of parents two questions. We asked them in the pink line, how many minutes per week do you think you should spend on learning activities? And the survey had the definition of learning activities, which is what the kind of activities I've already been referring to. They were the same. And again, I'm not going to hang my hat on the number 53. The point is simply that that number is the same across groups. But on the same survey, we asked for a self-report of how many minutes do you spend. And the point here is that for the college-educated parents, those numbers are not different. And for the less educated parents, the self-report of what you actually do is lower than what you say you ought to do. So by your own admission, if you are a parent without a college degree, you're not meeting your goals or your expectations or what you think is some optimal amount. Again, it's not like 100 hours, it's a modest number of minutes, but the point is to say there appears to be a gap between what you wish or what you think you ought to do and what by your own admission you do. Okay, so again, this just sets the stage for our question in our lab, which is why. You have a goal you want to meet, you have a notion of what you wish you could do, and there's one group of parents who either by self-report or by my looking in all the data sets that I can find, aren't doing it. we have a whole bunch of, I'm just going to say, kind of tried and true explanations for why does this difference exist and what should we do about it. And of course, one we talk a lot about is, well, obviously, these families who differ by education and income differ in the material conditions of their home. And so if we just gave families cash, they would be able to follow through on their intentions. Or, well, you know, because maybe they would go buy books, because we also are going to assume that families with limited education haven't got any books in their home. Or maybe we say, well, they don't have the time, because less educated parents are working so many more hours per week or per day than their college educated counterparts, so you can't expect them to find the time. Or, you know, they are limited in their own literacy or numeracy, and so doing these kinds of activities with children is stressful and unpleasant. Or, you know, parents are stressed for other reasons, so we need like a wholly different intervention to, you know, give them more cognitive bandwidth, so that opens up some more. So basically, you can, you know, in our papers, we will reject all of these arguments, most of them. I mean, we will just say that the evidence for any of those as a really a driver of these differences in, say, time use is pretty weak. Okay, to different, but in particular, you know, we have long thought. You know, we have a brand new study in the US that is the first randomized controlled trial of unconditional cash transfers, the Baby's First Years study. It's a big interdisciplinary team effort that is giving low-income households about $400 a month every month from the birth of the child through the child's 5th birthday, and actually just raising more money to keep it going. And so far, there's no treatment effects at all on parent time use or parent-child engagement or child skill development. So this is just one big example where I say giving low-income households cash is a very meritorious thing to do, and it might be super important for lots of other things, but it's not the thing that is standing in the way of whether you read to your child for 8 minutes tonight or don't. So again, we rule out a lot of what we call usual suspects. So I'm going to say that we rule out the usual suspects, which have a lot to do with structural barriers, again, which is not to say that solving people's structural constraints is unimportant. We don't believe that at all. Having a car to get to work, having money to pay your bills, those are first order concerns. But it's not the kind of thing that's going to make me try to elicit an enthusiasm for learning, a sense of curiosity in your child. So what we focus on, and so I founded my research lab 10 years ago with my colleague Susan Mayer, who is former dean of the Harris School and is a sociologist by training. We took a lot of inspiration from a lot of the work that was happening at Chicago in behavioral economics. Of course, Richard Thaler, who won the Nobel Prize in Behavioral Economics, sits across the street from us at the Booth School. And we were, I'm a research affiliate of a center over at Booth called the Center for Decision Research. And I'm sitting here listening to, why do people save for retirement? Why do people buy a gym membership and not use it? And all these, you know, sort of behavioral interventions. And I thought, you know, why aren't we thinking about parent decision making in the same framework? Because after all, parenting doesn't just fall out of the sky. I mean, you do decide whether it's automatic, but at some point you say, it's 8 o'clock. How am I going to spend the next 8 minutes? Am I going to read a book with my child? Or am I just, I'm tired, I'm distracted, I'm not, you know, thinking about this. I'm just going to put it aside. We're going to do whatever, and I'll do it tomorrow. And to us, that was a much more attractive way of thinking about parent-child engagement, because it allowed us to say parents are people too, and they make or don't make decisions just like the rest of us. And that there's a whole set of cognitive, cognitive roadblocks. This is just behavioral science terms, behavioral barriers, cognitive roadblocks, this all means the same thing, which are basically these thinking errors that get in the way of intention and action. And we have devoted our study to saying, well, do economically disadvantaged parents experience more of those cognitive barriers? I don't know. That's a question I'd like to answer. But we can be relatively sure, again, that they have more resources to manage them. So everybody procrastinates. Identity, by the way, I'm going to talk about that. That's not a cognitive roadblock. But these are things that shape the decisions we make, which I'm just going to say are not the usual suspects, are not the usual place we think to start when we're designing an intervention to shift parent behavior, okay? So what I want to do is like super brief. So I have 25 minutes to talk, and then we have 30 minutes to discuss. I want to tell you a little bit from a couple different research projects, all randomized controlled trials that we've done, that just give you a sense of how we try to incorporate these ideas into our study of parenting. And I have like lots more I could say, and some of these papers are published, and I'm very happy to talk at length, later. But I just, wanted to have you learn about what we were doing. So this is a study, actually this is long published, this paper. It's a collaboration with Phil Oreopoulos and Sebastian Gallegos and Susan Mayer, and it's published in some years ago. The Parents and Children Together study, we were really interested in the role of present bias. So the idea that you have an intention to do something, and you're impatient, or you give in to temptation, you're distracted in the moment, and you do something else. And the best time to do that thing becomes tomorrow. And again, conveying parenting in this way, as we said, the things that parents do are not that many minutes per day, but for college-educated parents, there seems to be fewer putting off until tomorrow what you said you wanted to do today. And for us, that was about procrastination or present bias. And I cannot wait. I keep saying to Christina and Patrick, I really, really want you to look in your data and tell me the differences by family background, because I know you've measured present bias, and I know you're thinking you might shift it with your intervention, and you have it in kids. I'm just going to tell you, you guys are the only ones with that data that I know about. So it's going to be hugely important when you publish it. But we hypothesized that this was an important behavioral bottleneck for less educated parents. And so we designed an intervention whose thesis was we're going to manage procrastination. And it was about increasing reading time. And we chose reading time because it was the most uncontroversial thing we could choose, because everybody believes reading is good. It's the #1 thing that Head Start tells parents. There is no low-income family that we interviewed that has no books in the house. They may have fewer books, but Head Start will give you, books to borrow. Families live near libraries. Again, sort of like, and parents will tell us, I love reading with my child. It's my favorite thing to do. When we read at night, it's this special close time. So again, all the ingredients are there, but why is the reading not happening? So we developed an intervention, and we basically just said we're going to throw the kitchen sink in this intervention with a bunch of messaging. So I should say all of our interventions we try to do as cheaply and as without a human touch as possible, which doesn't always work. Some people need a human touch, some people need a face-to-face intervention, but we wanted to say, how far can we get if we strip all that away? Because to us, that lends itself to scaling. And again, it's not going to work for everybody, but we wanted to see in all of our work, what kind of treatment impact can we get for an intervention that does nothing more than send parent text messages. So that's a lot of what we do. Okay, so in this intervention, we created a digital library and we put it on a tablet, and it was just an app, and it had 200 books in it. We do our work in Spanish and English. And it recorded reading time objectively, which was why we needed to create this app, because we're generally a bit skeptical of parent self-reports of what they're doing. So when the tablet and the app was in use, the app is keeping the time that it's in use. We have also, it's an audio, it's collecting a little video of the reading time. So we can also monitor that and make sure that it is the parent reading to the child and not just turn the app on and walk away. So that's the outcome variable, is the number of minutes that this reading app on the tablet was used. The treatment, as I said, this kitchen sink of messages. We had parents set goals. How much time do you want to read in the week ahead? The app is collecting objective data, so we tell parents at the end of every week, here's much reading time you actually did. We remind parents that they did set a goal. The messages don't say, good parents read, or you should read. They just reminded parents, remember you set a goal. And we also had this little prize competition that we set up among the parents we recruited these families from Head Start, by the way. Okay, so the control group just got the tablet with the digital library, and they went home for 6 weeks, and we sent them program messages but nothing else. The treatment group got 4 text messages a week, each of which had this different theme. And we measured, in particular, because this was our theory, how present bias parents were at the baseline. And we did that the same way I think you guys are doing it, which is 20 different variations of, do you want $5 now or $10 next week? And we incentivized the responses so that they would be entered in a lottery to get the payout of the scenario that they chose, etc. So this was our very first field experiment. We were super nervous, and there were so many disasters, and I became very sympathetic very quickly to people who were running field experiments, because it's like the most nerve-wracking thing you can imagine. In any case, the treatment worked. Okay, so just the first order answer is the treatment worked. There's a very large, small sample gives you a large treatment effect, so not hanging my hat on the magnitude of the treatment effect, but it was big. But again, it's not like I made treated parents read to their kids 8 hours a day. No, but they did read significantly more than the control group. And because I have a timestamp on the reading app, I can see that what we did was we made a sort of, the treatment group pretty quickly responded by reading a few minutes with their kid on most days, which is actually something that we were pleased to see, because that was kind of the goal. The control group, it was sort of an erratic, sometimes you read, sometimes you didn't, and it produced this treatment effect. So this is interesting, and this was exciting, although we always say that not finding a treatment effect is just as important. It is still the case that it's kind of more fun when you get a treatment effect.
It's so much longer than the numbers you showed us before, which was like 53 minutes a day, and they read
this is total amount of reading minutes for 6 weeks. It's a very tiny amount of reading. Yeah, this is not enough reading to boost any child's skill. Okay, like maybe sustained over 5 years and with spillover effects, but really this is just a proof of concept to see if managing present bias, which is what the treatment was designed to do, would make a difference. And let me tell you that here we just look at an interaction of baseline present bias among treated parents. Okay, so now we're like, this is like world's tiniest sample. This is like 100, 50 and 50 people here. So the point is that, so we had, as I said, even in this less educated sample, by the way, these were all low-income parents. I said they were recruited from Head Start. We have a baseline distribution of present bias. Some parents are present biased, others are not. We just divided it at the median. And the treatment worked for those parents who were initially present biased. For those who were already more forward-thinking, this was irrelevant. because they were already reading more. They didn't need us to remind them of a goal. It was redundant. To us, this was very interesting, not again for saying, okay, now everybody should adopt this, states should take up our PACT intervention, give everybody a tablet. No, it's rather that we get some new insight into what is the behavioral bottleneck, which I think does have implications, again, for thinking, well, how would reminders work? How would getting people to focus just a little bit on the future and overcome this tendency to say, the day is almost over, let's just bag it and do this tomorrow, okay? So we have lots of, this has been a long-running theme in our research lab is thinking about this and what kind of behaviors it affects and how can we manage it. I want to turn now to this question of identity. We are super interested in identity and the role that identity might play in inequality. So Christina came to Chicago last winter. We did a very nice workshop with our Stone Center on Wealth Inequality that Stephen Durloff runs, and it was on identity and inequality. And we had Rachel Cranton there and people thinking about what is the role of, again, identity in all sorts of outcomes, but we are thinking about how it shapes parent decisions. So of course, people hold multiple identities. People hold multiple identities simultaneously, but the decision you might make in any given decision-making environment is related to the identity that is most salient to you in the moment. So if I say conservation, you'll bring your, cloth tote bags to the grocery store, or, having an identity carries behavioral prescriptions. It affects decision-making. And again, people hold different numbers of identities, and for different people, different identities are invoked. And I'm going to, the last point is something I'm going to get to, but let me just show you what that looks like in a histogram before, instead of reading those words. So here, let's go. This is this 2,000 household survey we did with households who had a 5-year-old and a kindergartner in Chicago Public School. We did this very long survey. I should say the point of the survey was basically to try to find out just descriptively a bunch of stuff that's not usually on any other survey. So it was like a survey of unknown things, and it focused a lot on these behavioral barriers, and this particular question I love, asking parents about the identity that they hold. So the question on the survey here is, on a typical weeknight, what is the share, how very strongly do you relate to this set of identities? So everybody answered all the questions, and you can see a couple things here. Again, the answers for college-educated parents are in dark red, and the answers that the parents without a college answer are in the gray. Couple things I want to point out. These answers are much more similar than they are different. There's no gigantic differences across the two groups of parents in the answer that they give. Perhaps not surprisingly, college-educated parents a little more say they identify with being a working professional and being a partner or a spouse. It's just because they're more likely to be working and to be married. This is not surprising. Being a member of a community is not a very strongly held identity by anybody, but where it does vary, actually, it's among the non-college educated who feel a little more strongly. But the main point is that every parent, again, these are all parents, very strongly identifies with their role as a parent on a typical weekday night, and there's no difference by family background. So to us, this is quite interesting because in a descriptive sense, so identity presented itself to us as something that can be harnessed. It's very important to all parents. It dwarfs how strongly you identify with other things, other roles you occupy in your life. And in a descriptive sense, so in this same survey, we asked parents, as I've alluded to before, how much time they spend per week in learning activities. Again, in a correlational sense, for both college and non-college educated parents alike, there is a strong positive correlation between holding a strong identity as a parent and the amount of time you spend in learning activities, which just sort of, you know, I think that has a lot of, it makes a lot of sense. But since we're interested in boosting time in learning activities, this you know, presented itself as a question: is there a way to boost parent identity in a way that causally boosts investment in kids? Which, again, seemed like a very sensible question to ask, since it's something, I mean, maybe you could say, well, they already hold such a strong identity, you're not going to increase it. But our point is, what you want to do is invoke that identity in the moment. Okay, and can we bring that identity to top of mind as opposed to a different identity? And if we did that at a time that made sense, which, by the way, we still need to figure out. I mean, you don't want to do that in the middle of the day while you're at work. That's going to be that's going to be a cognitive dissonance. But what if we had an intervention that brought that identity of being a parent to top of mind at a time when we know that parents are with their kids? Okay, that all sounds fine and good, but this is just a correlation. So I you know, I have no idea if that would actually yield anything important. So I'm going to tell you about another experiment we did to see if there is a causal impact of bringing to top of mind the parental identity and investment in children, okay? And how did we do that? So when we do studies with parents, as you also do, we pay them some nominal amount of money for filling out surveys and spending their time doing the exercise with us. You know, we give them Amazon gift cards, which need to be redeemed. You have to like go online and click a link, and then you have the gift card. It's $10 or $20 or $15 typically. We found huge numbers of parents never cashed in their gift card. Like over years, we were just doing our budgeting, and we realized we had all this money that hadn't been earmarked. And we looked over all of our studies, and we realized that there was this very large share of parents who had yet to cash in their gift card. Now, these very imaginative PhD students who said, aha, this is an opportunity to do an RCT because we actually want parents to take their gift cards. And as an aside, the university won't let us have the money back. So even if years have gone by, I mean, rightly so, the university says you promise these families their money. They may come at some point to claim it, and you can't take it back. So one of my great PhD students, Noah Liu, said, well, we're interested in identity. Let's, you know, we just want to do a horse race on different kinds of messaging and see if we really just need to get rid of these gift cards. We need people to, so we had, I'm going to show you results from 2 different experiments we did. We did a very simple approach where we sent 4 text messages, 1 per week for 4 weeks. The control group was just the reminder. It was like, you have a gift card, reminder, you have a gift card. It hasn't been redeemed. In the green line was really our main treatment of interest, which is priming the parent identity. And we said, you have an unredeemed gift card, you can use it to buy something your child needs. That was the green treatment. The red treatment, we had a little competition within the lab. Everyone got to put in a treatment idea. Somebody else wanted to do the hourly wage, which is basically, it's $20, like this takes 2.5 minutes. You know, that's like having $400 an hour job, given the amount of time. Okay, and so we ran those 2 treatments against the blue group. And what we find is that the parental identity group, you know, increased by almost 50% relative to the reminder, the redemption of the card. The hourly wage didn't do anything. We did this again. We had another like bucket of unredeemed gift cards that we were interested in having parents redeem. And here, the control group was not just a generic reminder, but rather you have an unredeemed gift card, you can buy something for yourself, And the treatment group was you have an unredeemed gift card. Again, you can use the money to buy something your child needs. And again, almost 40% more likely to cash in the gift card if you got the parental identity message. So again, I'm telling you about a whole bunch of small experiments, none of which, they're all just giving us, I think, a little bit of information that we try to put all together to say there are things that shape parent decision making, which are malleable, which can be invoked in a pretty simple way, that you don't need like a practitioner to go to somebody's house and sit down with them for 2 hours in their living room and say how important it is to be a parent, etc. And that we can, experimentally see these shifts in parent behavior. And again, the purpose of our book is to try to take all these ideas and put them together. I will also say this is like super not, to something I think we could replicate, but for these experiments that I just showed you, we also find that consumption choices differ. So these data are quite poor, like they're very crude and noisy, and I'm not going to hang my hat on exactly what they're buying, but the point is we do see that we experimentally shift what parents are spending their money on. Again, all that is to say that there's something about invoking this identity which is shifting, whether you do the card at all and what you spend the card on. Okay, I'm just going to say this is the last slide on this theme of what are behavioral bottlenecks or cognitive barriers. We are interested in overconfidence. So overconfidence is interesting. All parents think their children are way above average. It's a psychological coping mechanism. But people are also misinformed about their child's skill. And now here, I'm contradicting myself a little bit because I said at the beginning of this talk, information is not a behavioral bottleneck. I don't 100% believe that. But I think there's information, and then there's maybe how you think about that information. And so, learning what your kid got on a standardized test, for example, is maybe not always enough to, maybe you say, well, the test was wrong, or they didn't eat breakfast that day. Actually, under different circumstances, they would. That's different from just, So this is, I think that, again, that kind of, that makes a lot of sense, but I would call that a behavioral bottleneck as well. All this is to say that many parents overestimate their kids' skill, and this is a particular problem among parents without a college degree. Here, I'm showing you results from a randomized controlled trial we did where we have the kids' test score. We tested the kids. We tested the kids, and then we asked parents we asked parents where they thought their kid ranked. This is about the perceived rank of the kids, so we can rank all the kids. And again, parents without a college degree are way more likely to overestimate where their kid falls in the rank distribution. College-educated parents also do that to a very large extent, but not as much as less educated. So this is another area we're interested in. Is this about access to information? Is this about the salience of, say, grades versus test scores? Is this about the signal in the information to which people have access? Is this what people do with the information once they get it? But the theory is that if you already think your kid is doing great, that's going to depress your motivation to invest in your child's skills. So the inequality in this overestimation of kids' skills is something that we're interested in. Okay, so I should wrap up. I'm going to just tell you, I'm going to steal 3 minutes from our discussion so that I can just wrap up. Okay, so this is kind of a summary of why we're interested in behavioral bottlenecks or cognitive barriers, why we are especially inspired by the idea that technology and simple messaging, we're working now, we're working with AI now, which a lot of people get super agitated about. We think there's a role of AI for good to support, not supplant parents. I always say I'm not interested in like a parent robot, but I have to say it may be that the counterfactual for some kids is that that would be better than nothing, but I'm not interested in going right to the parent robot. I'm interested in technology that, again, that complements, not substitutes for parents. But we have a lot of things we think about that make us think that thinking about parent decision-making in this framework that I've tried to describe, that identifies the barrier as the gap between wanting and doing, and says that thinking about parenting as a decision-making activity points us to different ways of managing behavior, and that technology may be particularly well-suited to managing some of those bottlenecks. It also has the merit of being cheap and scalable, which we always have our eye on. Okay, so I will skip ahead. I will give you the slides. Again, we have a new, I'll just tell you what we're working on right now. We have a new program. It's called Chat to Learn. It's an app, and there's a version of the app that has a chatbot feature. And the main goal of this app is to inspire different ways of talking with kids. It's as simple as that. Basically, what the app does is it sends conversation prompts to parents' phones. And the conversation prompt, instead of prompting parents with this very rote way of saying, oh, we're out on a walk, what color is the sky? Well, the answer is either blue or gray, or it's morning, where do you think the stars went to sleep last night? Just like there's a multitude of ways that you can start a conversation with a child that we believe will boost kids' vocabulary, but also a whole range of ways of thinking that we think are important. That we, to the best of our understanding, looking at descriptive data, we think is far more enjoyed by children of college-educated parents than their less educated peers. And so this is sort of all it is. It is sending, these are the outcomes we're interested in: language skill, curiosity, turn-taking, perspective-taking, the bond between parents and children. We're also creating the app for use in early childhood education classrooms. So there's a teacher version, so that when the teachers and the kids sit in circle time, as they did for your intervention. So maybe we add our Chat to Learn classroom to your curriculum. As a, to push out the kind of more rote interactions that teachers, as we know, also have with kids in settings that serve disadvantaged children. So this is the idea. I mean, again, it comes on the phone. It has beautiful bespoke illustrations that come with the prompt that we hired an illustrator to do. We've tested this in lab experiments. It works so far. It is doing what we hope it does, at least on the parent end. The parents will read the prompts and they will use more complex and diverse language. Children in these lab experiments also produce more complex sentences. So far, this is just mini one-shot lab experiments. We just have been funded by JPAL to do now a 3-month randomized control trial that we're going to do over the summer, where we just randomly give access to the app to some parents and the others not. Working for the very first time now for me in a developing country context, we're collaborating with Michael Kramer to do this work in Peru. The program already existed in Spanish because we work with Spanish-speaking populations in Chicago, so this was an opportunity to collaborate with the Development Innovation Lab. And obviously we have to change the prompts and the illustrations to be relevant to Peru, but we've been to Peru and we've done some pilot work, and all kids like dogs, as it turns out. There's a lot of similarity in the kinds of things that we need to change. So this is, I think that's it. These are the questions we're interested in. The book has a deadline of this summer. I'm working hard to make it. And this will be co-authored with Susan Mayer, and this is my team. And I am super happy now to discuss. Thank you very much.